Hello, and welcome back to the Wall Facer podcast. Today's guest is Octave of Jumper Exchange. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ryan. Happy to be here, actually.
Great,
Pretty
great,
nice
great.
place to be. Yeah.
Yeah, very happy to have you as well. I was going back actually before we hopped on and trying to see how long we've known each other for. I scrolled back in our Telegram history and it looked like we started talking in 2022, back when I was working on TrueFi. And I think you were putting out a bunch of Dune dashboards on things in credit and lending, and we'd connected that way.
Yeah, I think actually that's the way I really started to get involved in crypto, like playing a lot on Dune. So kudos
Yeah.
to the Dune team and like Dune product as well, because that's was really joyful to play there at that time.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, it's kind of actually a perfect segue. Obviously, we'll talk a lot about Jumper, but what was your initial foray into crypto? Like, what initially caught your attention and decided to make this your career?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it short, but basically, I started to play with crypto a long time ago, around like 2018, 2019. But I was not like full-time at all into it. I actually started my career in traditional finance, started to work on investment funds for like catastrophe bonds, kind of in between like catastrophe, hurricanes, quake modeling, and actually buying uh, bonds to like cover ourselves against like those big disasters, completely different from crypto. And then like after 2 years of doing that, I basically could not just stay in this industry and I really wanted to explore more of cryptos. Basically started full-time in 2022, actually, with my own company, working on like data topics. I mean, we'll discuss of that later, but it's actually pretty close to what we are doing right now. But yeah, I think what made me jump into crypto full-time was like, okay, 2017, 2018, you were talking a lot about that, or people were talking a lot about it, but no real product was there, or it was mainly off-chain and a bit of crypto. And with like the appearance and the structuring of like big protocols like Aave, like Compound, you saw that like you could actually build stuff that were not toy anymore, but like real stuff with crypto.
Yeah.
And that's why I joined.
It's funny you mentioned you used to work in like catastrophe bonds, as it feels like some sort of insurance product like that is potentially useful for crypto. But yeah, any kind of parallels to what you've tried to see people do in crypto insurance, or
I mean, so when like started my own venture in crypto, I try to like, draw the parallel, see if there were any opportunities there. And I also explored a lot like Nexus Mutual, for instance, that you
of
might
course?
know more recently, but there is also the guys from Ray protocol, which is more of a RWA protocol. What I must say is that like insurance is a pretty complex sector and like it's pretty hard to actually meet the needs from the two sides, like people wanting to get insured and people wanting to insure something. Like in 2022, even it's still the case today, but in 2022, it was like really hard to price the risk of
Yeah.
something. Like you had to pay a huge premium if you wanted to get like insured against something, or as an insurer, you would get completely ripped off. So, I mean, also kudos to Nexus because they are there like for a long time and the product is still working and like they really know how to move in this industry. But like, yeah, that's really, really hard business from my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked to a lot of people who Nexus is one of the first. It's usually, MakerDAO, maybe back in the day, but a lot of people too who Nexus was one of the first things they kind of grasped onto of like, okay, this makes sense coming from a more traditional industry. But
Exactly.
yeah, to your point, I mean, obviously they're still here. They're doing relatively well. Nothing catastrophic, of course, but yeah, there's just not a lot of demand for insurance, I feel. And I think to your point, it's like the amount that you kind of sacrifice in the form of a premium is quite high.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it has evolved now because we have like 3, 4, 5 years of backgrounds of how those protocols actually work in a scaled way with like billions deposited into some vaults and stuff.
Yeah.
So now we are kind of seeing, okay, maybe it's not like I can lose everything overnight. And, but like, yeah, like if you want really to ask for capital and go seeing institutional in order to deploy liquidity for insuring people, then for the past 2, 3, 4 years, it was like really difficult to get there to do that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, and also I just feel like the types of risks we have kind of evolved as well. In the past, I'd say maybe it was just smart contract risks and multi-sig sort of governance, human type of risks. Now there's all of these challenges, I think, around, with more modular lending markets, underlying collaterals that someone has to go in and understand each of those, realistically monitor like the ongoing when collaterals change. Yeah, it's not simple in any way.
Yeah, but the good thing with that is that like on the at least on the vault market, the risk, even if it's quite hard to analyze, is close. Like you know the scope of what you want to look at, and
Yeah.
it's well like more and more defined. So I guess we are definitely going in the right direction. And even if it's like it's hard to say, okay, if I have this asset in the market and like the LPV is this amount and like the volatility of this asset makes it hard to actually price the risk, you actually have all those parameters and then like you are moving in the right direction. The worst thing in insurance is like when you have a risk and you really don't know what to do with that. You really don't know how to model it, which is not
Mm,
the case anymore.
yeah. Huh. Well, interesting little
Yeah.
diversion there on topic of insurance. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to come back to the first company that you started, kind of Valha slash Kook Exchange. I find it particularly interesting because and we've talked about this offline too. I feel like I've been able to learn a bit from you just because I think so much of what we've tried to do at vaults.fyi has, it accidentally wound up going down a similar path in some respects, kind of. So yeah, we'd love to just kind of get the background for listeners of what that was, what you set out to solve, and that journey.
Yeah. So just to give a full context on that, when I started to work in crypto full time, I really focused on my own company and like it was basically called Valha. And we were defining that as like a DeFi connectivity layer, like getting simple standardized endpoint to interact with protocols and also to get data from protocols to propose yield on every interfaces. So the goal was really to build like a B2B company that will surface and offer yield to any interfaces, fintechs, crypto wallets, whatever that want to use that. It's pretty close to like jump around that we are building today. And it's also pretty close to what you're doing. And like we have discussed a lot about it. Just also skilled to see vaults.fyi doing so well today. But yeah, like the story behind that, I must say is like pretty simple. With my former co-founder, Thomas, we were like, I don't know, like just the idea of aggregating and making stuff simpler would really strike our mind in general. So, and like we love the intellectual exercise of actually having something super hard and confusing and trying to make that like way simpler to use as like Lego, like decoupling things into like simpler elements. And we thought it was like a pretty nice challenge to solve at that time because it was at the time of Luna, like, you had like the UST offering 15% yield and people started to get interested into yield. But then like in order to access it, you had to go like to a specific interface. You had like to even sometimes just onboard to a new wallet in order to get there.
Right.
And we thought maybe it would make more sense like if there is actually a way to centralize everything as a B2C business or as like an interface you could offer all of them in a simple fashion. But yeah, like it's definitely not coming from something I have in mind since I'm a child. It's more of a like okay, this is a nice challenge to face. Let's start with that and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think kind of similar for us. It was what we do with vaults was like a challenge or a problem we sort of stumbled into, and then over time, sort of added all of these additional layers and things that people have asked for. But yeah, I mean, realistically, today it is still a challenge that I think people are only now really thinking about. Okay, we want to
Yeah.
integrate all of this DeFi into our solutions. How do we actually go about doing that in the most streamlined way? And what does that actually entail, right? The market data, the transactional layer, the position tracking, sort of this whole suite of things that ideally need to get bundled together.
So yeah, I think we really face the same challenging, the same questioning, and like we also discussed about that, as you said, offline, like several times. What I understand pretty well, like a good lesson is like the timing is everything, because I think when we did that, it was actually not a a pressing issue in the market.
Mm.
Like people were keen to learn more, keen to test it, but it was, at the time it was like also the kind of creation of meme coins, like hold the hype
Yeah.
on that and making money through this aspect will be much more exciting for B2B partners than like any B2C interfaces. So I think we started that too early. And like, if you are too early, then you're wrong. And it's kind of hard to see, but it's a good lesson to learn.
One of the other things I think you were kind of early on to, and again, I think informs maybe like the LiFi jumper strategy, also kind of what we do with having APIs, but our own front end experiences as well is, you had the set of APIs and then you had the kind of front end exchange experience as well. How did
Yeah.
that come about? Was that super intentional or just like how what was the thinking?
So I think the interface, so like the API came first. It was like really what we wanted to push in the first place, because building all the logics is what was exciting us. But it came naturally because when we were like doing demos with protocols, like with anyone wanted to test the product, it's actually pretty hard only to show the API documentation or like the
Completely.
swagger. Like, yeah, you need to show them something else. And like, if you want to show something else, you can do a prototype, but you actually want to show something that is a bit more beautiful. And then like you start to build this kind of experience that could fit to a B2C usage. And then, yeah, like finally, we also wanted to put that in the hands of like people that were like not businesses, but actual individuals that would help us shape the product better, because there are so many different feedbacks. And like we finally did that because people were just asking for it, and it was also just simpler for us to iterate on the product with a proper and clean interface.
Hi, this is Ryan, host of the Wallfacer podcast. I want to tell you about our latest product that we think will change how you interact with DeFi. Managing DeFi positions across protocols is complicated. That's why we built vaults.fyi, a single, clean interface for accessing top protocols like Aave, Compound, Morpho, Euler, Lido, and many more across major networks. No wrappers, no extra contracts, just direct access to the best yields with real-time analytics. If you've gotten any value from this podcast, please try it out at vaults.fyi. The link's in the podcast description, and my DMs are open on X and Farcaster. I read every piece of feedback. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, cannot agree more with that statement.
Yeah.
Trying to explain APIs and just show the swaggers and stuff, it's very abstract. Very
Like
abstract.
in your head, it sounds cool. Like when you're thinking about that at the beginning, it sounds cool, but like, yeah, it's not cool when you're actually
Correct.
like in a call with someone
Correct.
that is not aware of that.
Yeah, well, and one of the things when I was just doing some research for this that I hadn't realized is, before you guys joined the LiFi Jumper team, you had actually been working with them in some capacity as well. They were a customer, maybe it seemed, of the APIs. How did that come about? And then how did ultimately the conversation go with you and your co-founder joining them?
Yeah, so the conversation with them was not on like Jumper Earn as it is today. It was definitely not around that. It was more around like building cross-chain apps. So really on the execution side, in the more seamless way. And at the time it was in 2023 that we started to talk. It was really not developed. Like you had Zapper also working a bit on that, on this topic. But actually what we succeeded to do, at least to some extent with specific set of protocols, etc., we really created this one-click experience to a specific pool from any chain, from any token. And it was actually pretty cool. And so basically our conversation and like what we developed together was mainly around that, between like what works in theory and also what works, like how to say that, like what works on a developed mode or like on a demo mode is not shaped sometimes for the production or the mode. So it took some time to actually took it, but yeah, it was already a big topic at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Reflecting on when you ultimately joined the LiFi Jumper team, did you kind of have a bigger vision of what you wanted to shape Jumper to be at that time, or was it still sort of open? Like what was the thinking and conversation around that?
Yeah, so I will first explain what was Jumper at the time, because LiFi, the way it was developed is it's first and foremost a B2B product. And like Jumper came as an experimentation. As I described Kook for Valha, it was exactly the same for LiFi. So they deployed an interface just to basically show that to the world. And it's way more easy to talk about an interface than like about your API. And it went pretty well. Like it went way better than Kook, that's for sure. Like people were actually super excited about that. Like usage was crazy, even without big marketing. And so for the first, it started in March 2023. They were an interface before, but like the Jumper interface as we know it today started at the time. Like for 6 or 9 months, the usage went skyrocketing. Came with this thing of, okay, we can actually make something out of it. Like just like demo, there is just one function today, but it could be enlarged to so many different use cases. So we want to build around that. But when I arrived, like basically the statement of what they were agreeing on is that like Jumper needs to be way bigger than that. And we need to play around like finding a lot of use cases in DeFi, but there was no roadmap of what we actually wanted to build. So we really came at the, like in the beginning of 2024 of like, okay, maybe we shape a vision for Jumper at that time. Maybe we see which kind of sectors we want to explore in crypto, like in general, like it could be NFT, it could be like RWAs, it could be anything. And also to understand a bit what our users are doing, because I mean, you can make a lot of assumptions, but the best thing to start at is like looking what people are doing after or before using Jumper in order to maybe go into this direction as well.
How do you kind of think about like what Jumper will eventually evolve into? I mean, right now, and I don't even know like kind of how this ranks, but I think you've done what, about 10 billion in cumulative swap and bridge volume or something like that?
So Jumper only, I think it's 25 billion now.
Oh, okay. Well, I was off.
I don't have the latest number, but I think it's on, this.
Where do you see that evolving into? Do you think that the kind of browser form will be the end state? Are you thinking about mobile apps or sort of other product experiences here? Like what that looks like?
Yeah, like we are thinking about a lot of different things. So yeah, to start, I must say that the bridge and swap experience like of the widget today is definitely not what we want to end to. Like, and that's why we developed Earn also in the first place, is because basically Jumper users are sometimes using our interface maybe once or twice a week. Mm-hmm. And so you don't create like the connection with the user because they're actually using another product after using Jumper. We are just like a medium, not like an end. And like out of our user, we saw that like 60% of them were actually depositing into DeFi pools in general after bridging. Like the natural evolution to building Jumper on came pretty much naturally based on this fact. That's the first thing. And like the way we shape this vision today is, okay, we want to cater and do pretty well for sophisticated DeFi users. So we really want to keep the brand around like, building stuff that matters to people that are using crypto today, that have been there like for a couple of years. So that's why we really are improving the Jumper on product today. That's what we want also to, we also deployed our Jumper portfolio section on Jumper, and we want to double down on that, providing more analytics, providing more insights on this thing for users that care about that, like that care about those details, that care about like, okay, knowing what they can do better on their portfolio. So I'm really in favor to develop this niche. And I know that like the ethos is deploy crypto to normies. I totally get that and I totally listen to that. But I also think that like if normies get inbound into crypto, it will also grow the pie of sophisticated user. Like, on the internet, you had people that were like not super keen about it at the beginning, but as it was growing popularly, then there was more and more people deep into that and like looking into more advanced and more sophisticated products. And I believe in the same thesis for crypto. That's the first thing. Really deploy products for sophisticated users with the bridge and the swap capabilities. We have like another big thing in the bag on this part portfolio. And we are also exploring, how we can touch or how we can reach to new users. And we definitely think that mobile is the right medium to do that. I think that like we cannot, with the current state of the web app, attend to or reach to new categories of users because they will not like set their MetaMask or their Rabi wallet for that. It's just like it was tested hundreds of times, thousands of times. It doesn't work, whatever you are doing, like social logging, whatever. So what we saw or what we think we saw in the past 2 years means like mobile is a mean to reach a new audience.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Even just thinking about kind of the earlier points you made there of kind of building for the people who are here today, I'd say we also kind of have always taken a similar stance on some of that. And, I'd heard this description of Robinhood once, where I think one of the things Robinhood does quite well is that it, simplifies the experience of trading. And for so many first-time people, it's their first foray. Like, someone just getting into buying stocks today is going to set up Robinhood. They're probably not going to set up an E-Trade account. But at the same time, Robinhood, I guess you could say, kind of feels sophisticated enough and like does have advanced features that as you get more sophisticated as a trader, you can opt into these more advanced flows. And even for sort of very novice traders, it gives them enough tools that I don't want to say this in a rude way, but it makes people feel smart in that, like from a very kind of emotional sense, you feel like you have access to all of these tools. And it almost like doesn't give it doesn't make the user feel childish or something like that, which I
Yeah.
think is something I've thought a lot about in that kind of design aesthetic and like emotional feel of some of those products.
I mean, when you think also of the Binance centralized exchange experience, I'm not talking about Binance wallet, but really centralized
Yes.
exchange for really tend like to echo what you just said, because you have so many different options, so many different things that like it also may be a play to make the user feels in control and like feels that like it can trigger so many different things on the UI. Yeah, I mean that's not like the pure intent that we have, but in some ways it could relate to what you described.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also something, you know, unfortunately, as an American, I no longer have access to Binance. But, you know, there's such a difference, between the Binance UI and like the default Coinbase UI.
Yeah.
And I think, it's also, maybe like a Chinese design aesthetic versus a very Silicon Valley design aesthetic. But, I have to say, I mean, I'm not a particularly sophisticated trader, but at points in time where maybe I had access to Binance, I really enjoyed the UI. Like, again, it's just, even if I didn't need to see all of this detailed tick level data, it was good to see that. Like it improved what I felt like was the experience there. So I'm maybe more on the prosumer side than hopefully I'm not pure retail, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, like exactly. I think the one word to describe all of that is like prosumer. We are now in crypto in this niche of quite sophisticated users that know what they want. And like we want to reach out, like we want to cater those guys because those are the ones that are bringing meaning to your product. And like I think like even the profiling of normies has not been done yet. Like there is a lot of assumptions around like how people will behave if they were never touching crypto and they would get onboarded into the ecosystem. But actually, I don't think we have like, or I don't have like a super detailed portrait of someone that just want to get there for the first time, to know their motivation, to know like, will they get bored of something super simple on the next day because you just have to click one button and then you're all set. I think like, it's a really complicated problematic, and like you are always seeing tweets around that. Never like thoughtful explanation or thoughtful studies of when we are talking about normies, we are talking about this kind of normies, this kind of normies, this kind of normie that are like completely different profiles.
Totally. Oh, we do a lot of work with the world team as well, and I think that is really the one app that I would say has appealed to like I don't know what you would call it, like the global 90% or something, right? Like people outside of the global top 10%. And it is just such a different user base, such a different level of sophistication. And I think that is actually the user base where some of these kind of one-click flows, like the one button press, is potentially more appealing as long as there's some economic value tied to it. But figuring out how to monetize those users, I think, is just such a challenge. Like it's much tougher to build a business around that very long, not even the long tail, like the bulk of the world, I guess you could say, but in terms of people, but it's very tough to build actually a business around.
Yeah, I totally agree on this. I mean, I didn't solve that, so I could not give any clue on how to do it.
Nice. All right. Well, I guess coming back to kind of jumper there a bit. So I mean, perhaps one way to kind of think about what you've said is, you could think of kind of jumper V1 as, hey, this is like a thin layer on top of the LiFi API stack so that, hey, we can show you actually how these things work. It's sort of a demonstration, swap and bridge, and that in itself was very successful as a standalone consumer product. Now you're moving to this place where you say, okay, we have all of these users who come to us. I would assume you're one of the probably most trafficked sort of DeFi sites in the industry. You're like, okay, how do we get users to stick here, form a deeper relationship with us, do more of their activities through Jumper in some way?
Yeah. Exactly. And we want to do it, but not in a closed way. Like we don't want users only to users. I mean, if users use mainly us, we won't be against that at all. But we want, like, for instance, we are curating opportunities. We think that the ones that we are showing are among the best within the industry and for like many different reasons, but we still give you the opportunity to like go somewhere else. Concrete example is that we ask ourselves sometimes, do we want to build a wallet gateway? There is some platforms that exist in this industry when you have to actually get onboarded there, like have your own smart wallet before being able to interact, which could work in some way. Like I'm not saying those are not good products, but what I'm saying is that like once you are doing that, it's so hard to actually build an experience that will cater to the kind of people you are targeting, because they will want at some point to explore something else. And you have to accept that. And like, you have to fight in a way where like the moat you create is not around like the physical modes of actually being painful to go in and out of the ecosystem, but like the recognition, the brand, the trust on like, okay, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to Jumper because it's actually smooth to operate there. And I know I'm not frustrated. Like I love how the UI is made, so I will come back to this.
It's funny you mentioned that because we on app.vaults.fyi, we also don't have like social login or any sort of thing like that integrated. It's entirely a, bring your own wallet type of experience. And we've gone back and forth on it a lot. But yeah, I think to your point, for us, it's been, I think the users we cater to today, they're already committed to Rabbi or some ledger and Gnosis setup. And like, they're not going to create a smart account. They're not going to create a, social login wallet with us. We probably will still add it in the future, but like at least today, we've also kind of made the same decision there.
Yeah, and I think on this, like I am really talking about like the web experience, not like the mobile.
Yeah.
I think that mobile
Yeah.
is definitely different, like the way to create the relation with the user. It has nothing to do with that, but web is so open, like it's so permission, like the way the ethos of how crypto was built with MetaMask and Rabbi and like any wallet at the center of every interaction makes it hard to like counter these effects. Wallets are also starting to try to claw back the user to their UI, like you can see on Rabbi, many stuff like prediction markets, like also some abilities to interact with pools directly.
Yeah.
But I actually think that like users, at least on web, will not agree a lot to do that. Like they would at some point because it could help, but they will still want to explore proper websites to actually perform actions.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Well, great. So you mentioned something actually that I want to talk about as well. And obviously we've been thrilled to be a partner to you guys, to everything you're doing on Jumper Earn. I've been wondering too, how have you thought about the curation of what you decide to show there? Are you kind of leaning into the more Lindy and established protocols? Is there some sort of risk factor? Like how have you guys been thinking about what to show?
Okay. So the way we have thought of it is we want to apply the 80-20 rules at first, like basically cover the 20% of the protocols that, or maybe like even the 5% of the protocols that represent 95% of the DeFi ecosystem. You cannot take an UI like that wants to aggregate opportunities seriously if you are not aggregating Aave, Morpho, Euler, for instance. Like you need to have the big names in there, like to just show that you are serious about it and like you are a real aggregator. Then in terms of like accepting the long tail, it's still a process that we are like refining. It's not like we have the perfect answer to that. We are looking to a lot of different factors, especially around security, like around like the history of the protocol, like the audits that have been made. Lastly, like if there is like any critical errors that have been solved, fixed or not, and to assess the credibility of the protocols as well, we look at where they are integrated, like in crypto in general. So like we also think of this, it's a kind of thing where you also want to assess who is trusting them in order to have a sense of like, can I trust them? I know that it's something where it's not sufficient only to do that because otherwise, there is this adage that say, don't trust, verify. Yeah. But it's still a factor that makes sense sometimes to do it. And last thing, but it's also quite important, for all of the small protocols, we want to have like a personal relation and touch with the founders because eventually there is always questions coming to mind regarding like points in their documentation about how they run the strategies and stuff. And like the best way to have the right answer is not to ask ChatGPT or like any other AI tool. It's actually to talk about this issue to the guy or to the girl. So having a personal relation and also like the way it's really human at the end of the day. Like, with this kind of system, you still need to have like a human touch to be sure of what you're doing.
Yeah, very much so. I think, there's kind of a lot of stuff in the news right now about MEV Capital, whatever is going on there, wish them well, but, sort of their funds and stuff imploding. And yeah, I mean, when I kind of look at what has happened in so many of these scenarios, it's very clear that in a lot of these curation, there is also a human element that happens there and what they're choosing to accept, perhaps things that we're not privy to on the lender side or investor side of these products. And it's challenging. I mean, even like in the types of things we think about of like next big data problems to try and solve, right? It's drilling down levels deeper into some of these different products. But, even there's so much complexity of the difference between, say, Morpho markets and Euler markets and, just sort of trying to actually get to the root of, okay, what is the
biggest
risk dependency in these different things.
Yeah. And one thing I should add on that is like we also, I mean, us and in general, we also plan to map this risk out in a more concrete way. I mean, we have our own internal mapping of how we perceive the stuff, but it's not gradual. It's not something that we can just show to the user today. So we really want to work on this scoring and having our own methodology there. But we really take it with caution, like, because there is so many elements to take into account. And the thing is, if once you draw methodology, then if something comes out of it, then it destabilizes what you are doing. Like basically people won't take you seriously. But we think that there is a lot of people that we get inspired from that are doing that on market. Like, I mean, you have your own scoring and like it's already give a good opinion on how this pool is perceived, at least from a quantitative perspective. There is also Credo on the market that is doing a nice job. Like even the curators, like the biggest example I think of is Steakhouse, which is like doing a really good job also in explaining how they curate, how they underwrite the risk on all the vaults they are creating. And yeah, hopefully more and more people can do that because it also facilitates the work. But yeah, to come back to my first point, quantifying like in numbers or in scoring what we are seeing is pretty hard. And like, even if you are seeing those numbers on some UIs today, you really have to think of yourself, okay, it cannot only be the only source of truth I'm looking at if I want to take a financial decision.
Yeah. Well, for anyone who's interested in what Steakhouse does, you can check out the prior episode of the podcast with Seb. And thanks for the plug. And yeah, I mean, the way that we've approached it is, so I think one of the challenges I've observed in kind of risk scoring products that have tried to come to market is that they're either too narrow in that like they just focus on one protocol, or they don't focus on the things that I would say actually depositors care about. So what I mean by that is like, for us today, we've got 80 protocols. And so we tried to devise a framework that could just be generally applied to all of them, knowingly being very imperfect. But, we focus on sort of the lindiness of the protocols and individual pools. I don't even know how we could begin to really approach actually rating every individual thing that we do, kind of like an L2B kind of fashion. That just feels kind of overwhelming. I think the other place I've seen people try, I think, what are they called? DeFi Collective? I think they put out a framework that was very focused on
DeFi Scan. Yeah.
DeFi Scan, yes, thank you. They put out a framework that was very focused on governance risk, which it's a risk. To me, it was not like the most pressing thing in a lot of these, at least at the major protocols. I'm not particularly aware of where like governance risk has been the factor that's caused people to lose money, for example. So, the way that we've thought about approaching it going forward is we would like to ingest all of these different methodologies and like be fairly agnostic. If anyone has something good out there, we'll implement it. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I would really encourage you to invite Token Bryce or Token Brice on the next podcast, because I think he will defend his opinion on that.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know him personally, but a former employee of Jumper and a colleague of mine was like working on this kind of topic with him as well. So it was pretty close to what they were doing. And yes, I agree. Like, I mean, it's for sure one problem. Like, you have seen protocols collapsing because of this factor, but like, there is so many different things that could happen that if you're only looking into that, and also you could see majority of protocol being rated as F because there is some kind of centralization. And okay, maybe sometimes it breaks and it will always break. But if you are looking at risk this way, then you're also losing a lot of opportunities that you can get in the market.
Correct. I think, I will agree. I think that was the other thing I noticed with DeFi Scan as well, which is it felt like all of the protocols, and granted, they're the ones being rated, maybe it's good if they don't fully agree with it, but I do feel like you need some sort of consensus across like the people you're rating that, okay, maybe it's not exactly the score that we wanted, but it's fair. I think, L2 beat, for example, even if people don't like the rating that they get from L2 beat, I think people are aligned that, okay, this was done fairly and we understand how it works pretty well. So yes. Very interesting nascent part of our markets, for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely not the end. I think it's like too young to even judge what's happening right now.
Talking before this call too, just about, sort of all of these new vault standards that come to market. These to me introduce a completely additional kind of new risk where there's a lot of off-chaining of the assets, or you're dependent on RWA collateral that's getting marked on a weekly or monthly basis. And so you're introducing a completely different kind of risk that is not native to any existing real frameworks. So yeah, I mean, I hope someone is able to figure out a proper business completely around risk, or, as we've talked about, some sort of maybe consortium for a bunch of different providers to contribute.
Yeah. It brings me to one topic, and
Yeah.
maybe like one take is be aware of the shitification because of RWAs. I think RWAs are a big opportunity, but the people that will come first with their RWA in the crypto markets are not the most qualitative assets, are not the people with the best intentions. I think it doesn't apply to everyone that's there, but you have to put those glasses, you have to take those lenses and like think of that this way. Like, it's a new market, it's a new opportunity for a bunch of new actors, and the motivation to get there is because you are not succeeding into your current markets. And those who are not succeeding in the current market are doing so because maybe sometimes they are not known and like people don't recognize them, but a lot of time because it's a bit shitty what they are doing off chain. So yeah, be aware of that.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously connected in sort of wave one of RWA stuff. And every now and then I'll go back and take a look at Goldfinch's homepage. And that to me was kind of just like looking back on those loans, that was maybe not to pick on them too much if anyone from there is listening, but maybe that was like the original kind of shitification of loans where it was just pure. I mean, in hindsight, it seems like almost everything there was adverse selection.
I think it was maybe 90 or 95% of pools that became defaulted. Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy.
It was a staggeringly high percentage.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to make enemies, so I won't say anything about Goldfinch, but that's one example out of many that could happen. And like, I'm personally afraid of that. And also from running a business and like running an interface with Jumper, it's a lot of efforts to make, to like take our radars and like see what's going well and what seems to be a bit more weird. Like, yeah, there is a lot of work to be done there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, coming back to Jumper and LiFi a bit, I've always been curious about, and I think, as a part of working with you guys, I've been trying to kind of understand what I would call like the stack of cross-chain and bridge transactions. And sort of, we've thought about even integrating more of this capability natively through our APIs and through our interfaces. I just feel like there's so many levels to the sort of provider stack, where you go to integrate one thing and you realize there's 4 other things under the hood, and then you talk to one of them and you realize there's this other provider that's kind of actually sort of doing all of this. So, I'd love to understand, I guess, a little bit more on kind of the LiFi lens, like how you view some of the competitive landscape for swapping and bridging today, and maybe even tying it back, why then it is people choose to use Jumper or LiFi over some other provider that they could go to. Like, what are those defining kind of characteristics?
Yeah. So in general, I think that like the swap and the bridge market themselves, like not taking into account all the other components, are like super competitive today. It becomes, I will not say a commodity because it's still like quite complex to actually build and get there, but like it's really hard to capture fees only on this matter. Like, you need to provide other kind of values in order to be just valuable in the eyes of like people that want to integrate you. That's something, I mean, that's not only about LiFi, like that's about like every company that is in this space suffering the same stuff. Like, we are competing around tight margins, like really, really super tight margins, because like you can decrease your rate by 10 bips, 5 bips, and like you can just go lower than this route until 0. What I think is important from the LiFi eyes today is really to build a complete stack of things that you can use. Like, think of it as like a toolkit for fintech or for a wallet that can like not only use the screwer or not only use like a specific tool, but can put them together and like can actually build something big because they have in their toolkits 20 or 30 different tools. And this verticalization, sometimes it's done purely internally because like we develop the capacity to add things on top of that, even on just on the swap stuff. Like, there is swaps using like external liquidity, and that you can also build swaps using your own liquidity, which are like 2 different sectors. Can think of that, and you can also think of like building toolings around data that you can get, like tokens data, pricing, prices of tokens, like many stuff around that. And sometimes you also need to work and cooperate with other companies because you can just not build everything internally. So there is this kind of tension of, okay, I actually want to like expand what I'm doing, but I also have like resources constraints, and I need to adapt, and I need to work with like the best people that I know to like build the most exciting product. And I will say like it's a bit different on the jumper side because we are way less like the footprint that we tried. Yeah, the footprint we have is more tight, but the way I can see this relation with LiFi is we are kind of a pioneer or an explorer around like the whole market, and we have our own idea on how to tackle that. You know, LiFi today, LiFi, sorry, today is at a scale-up stage. Jumper is more into the startup lean mode of like, okay, we actually want to test things fast to see if it works or not.
Yeah.
And so we are trying things. We see if it sticks or not. And LiFi takes the lessons and like can actually build something that is also making sense for bigger actors.
I'd love to understand too, you know, how you kind of thought about working with someone like us on some of what you're doing today. And yeah, I guess kind of generally how you think about kind of partnering with different teams.
Yeah, so I think what I just said before resonate on this question because, yeah, like the data you're providing or the code data that you're providing on the execution side is actually super helpful. And that's something that like, if we wanted to do that ourselves, it's more capacity to deploy is like other topics that you then totally avoid because you need to focus on it. So it makes sense to partner with a company like you. And like around our connection, I think first it was like a personal connection because we knew each other for a long time. I knew that you were working on this topic and we were on the same wavelength. So it's way more easier than when you can trust someone at the beginning that like they're not bullshitting you. Like I knew how you were going to build the product and how exactly it would be shaped. So it just removes a lot of like questions or concerns from my head. And like the way we like to operate with people is when there is something to fix and it's going fast and it's not like a whole conundrum to actually find the source of the problem and like fix it. Like it's super practical, nothing exceptional on that, but maintaining good relation comes with like solving problem fast, and it's totally the case with you. So like you can use that as like a marketing snippet for other partners, but comes around those things. Yeah.
Certainly will. Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess as we're kind of coming up to the end, I know outside of your actual role at Jumper, you also spend a lot of time writing. You know, I've been subscribed to your newsletter for quite some time on Substack. I think you changed the name in the last few months.
Yeah, I try a few things. Yeah.
I'm curious, just like as you're sort of, you know, eyeing the DeFi landscape today with a kind of particular eye around things like yields and APYs, like what's catching your attention these days? What feels interesting? What maybe feels a little boring? Like what are you really paying attention to?
So if we stay into the DeFi space, I think what's interesting is to see the evolution of Solana there. Like it's still super nascent, but there is definitely something happening there. So it's quite weird because they are mastering the meme coin like ecosystem in general. Like they have the best friendly apps for people to get onboarded into like kind of the degen activity. Yeah. It's not the case. Like they need to learn from scratch on the DeFi space. They are like doing well and like they are evolving well, but it's way more challenging because it's actually not at all the same kind of product, and you're not building that with the same state of mind. So that's actually quite interesting to see. I mean, come back on what's something we discussed before. The insurance space in general is quite interesting because it's actually developing a lot, like in the last 6 months. Apparently, there is a lot of interest from institutional actors into like being rewarded with, being protected on their Morpho or Aave or Euler or Fluid positions. And apparently the pricing around that is way more interesting than before. Like you can actually, if you are earning 5 or 6% on the vault, you can actually get insured without losing 90% of the yield, which totally change the market conditions for that. So I think we'll see that growing way more, but more on the institutional side. And like, I think what's boring is, and it's also logical, but we were talking about like 2 or 3 years ago about 1,000 chains that will interact with each other. I think we are in this kind of conditions, and it will set what we'll see in the future where they won't be actually like 1,000 chains that will be interesting, at least for B2C users. Might see like 6, 7, 8 of them, and interoperability is still needed between all of that to make it work seamlessly. But yeah, I don't believe, at least in DeFi, seeing like a ton of chains working well in the next 2 or 3 years. And I'm working in the interop and bridge ecosystem as well. So that's a bit counterintuitive based on my position.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you had a controversial opinion, but I guess, given your position, that is a controversial opinion. I would be very inclined to agree with it as well, though. I mean, I think you guys probably have the best metrics on this from like where users are actually sending funds to network-wise. But from our smaller sample size through like where users deposit through our interface or through our integrations, very surprisingly, it's still mainnet very clearly number one, Base and Arbitrum very closely number 2 and 3, and then it's just a giant drop off. I mean, after that, it realistically is actually probably World, maybe just because there's so many people there, but the deposit sizes are so small. And then, every now and then you'll see like a Unichain pop up. It'd be popular for a bit, but yeah, I mean, at least in our metrics, it really is dominated by those 3.
It's exactly the same for us. And also
Wow.
what we are seeing is like you have, Virgin got developed and they had a pretty nice ecosystem in the first place. Like it's also the case for Katana that have been developing a really rich ecosystem. By the way, we have a campaign on Jumper with Katana today. So feel free to look at it because the yields are super juicy. But what I want to say is that like it's in the first place hard to catch the attention of users that are committed to a specific chain. And even when you have done it, there is like an urge to come back to your own chain that is like super hard to fight. And we try to like work and see what leads to this kind of behavior. Yeah. But I think, I really think framing the ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem as there is a non-chain that you have with your wallets and like different satellites on top of that where you can go there, jump there for a day or 2 and then go back to your home chain. I really think it makes sense to think of it this way. But yeah, the thing is that like when you have a home, then like a lot of people have the same home than you. And then it becomes hard for all the ones that are gravitating around the home to actually exist in the long run. I hope I'm mistaken for them, but I hope I'm wrong for them, but like it's super, super hard to become and have this perception of being a home chain for sophisticated users.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I mean, I think you mentioned Berachain there briefly. Like that to me is another great example where like it had kind of its moment and just the retention on these things is so challenging. Yeah. I've even maybe been a bit surprised with Hyper EVM, where there certainly is a DeFi ecosystem there. And obviously Hyper, Core, the perpetuals exchange is a massive, the biggest success we've had in crypto in a long time. But even the DeFi ecosystem there, I think, has probably not taken off in exactly the way that I thought it would have in terms of size and scale. It's challenging. You're completely correct, though.
Yeah, like on this, I don't have the latest numbers neither, but I think like you maybe have out of the whole hyperliquid ecosystem, you have like 95% of the capital or the liquidity in Hypercore or like on the Perps exchange, maybe 5% in DeFi. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, a bit weird to see that, and I can't explain it.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess as we're coming up on the close here, where should people go to learn more about what you're building, to follow along on your Substack, learn more about you? Where would you like to direct people to?
Okay, so I will browse you first on jumper.exchange. It will change pretty soon to jumper.xyz, but you can type both and you will land to our place. That's granted. To learn about Jumper in general, I really recommend you to go on Twitter, also write jumper.exchange there, and like you will find our profile. We are like putting all the product announcement, all the chain launches, all the new opportunities that we are like listing on as well there. So like it's really the right place to follow us. And I'm personally also available and joinable full time on Twitter. So you can like send me a little DM at Octavio Not Punk whenever you want. If you have like feedback on the product, if there is something you want to see or something you really don't like about what we are doing, happy to receive it. Yeah, basically that's it. We also have like our own blog. We have like way different ways to actually check what we are doing. We'll also release soon our Jumper docs. But I think like just playing on with the interface and going on Twitter makes a lot of what you can do with Jumper.
Awesome. I will include all of those links in the podcast notes. And I guess one last question, because I've never asked. What is the origin of Octavio Not Punk?
Okay, really good point. So my name is Octave. That's for the first part. And when I entered crypto, I was like defined as like a boring guy, because I was in the TradFi industry before, and like crypto was a punk ecosystem. Like you have the punk collection, and I'm just not a punk. So
Got it. Okay, cool.
And this thing,
Cool.
super
Nice.
logical.
Simple. All right.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks for spending so much time with us. It was great chatting. I'll chat with you soon and hopefully see you in maybe Cannes or something like that in the near future.
Yeah. See you at TCC. And thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. Talk soon.
See you.